China now controls over 70% of global manufacturing. Across more than 100 critical industries, more dominance than any nation in human history. The list is shocking. And I'm not talking about minor sectors. I'm talking about total control in everything from the phone in your hand to the materials building every skyscraper, from the batteries powering electric vehicles to the machinery making everything else possible. This isn't theory. These are the hard numbers that reshape how the entire world manufactures, builds, and powers itself. Let's start with the products. Filling every room of your house. The stuff filling your life. Look around the room you're in right now. Your clothes, your furniture, the bag you carry, the glasses on your face, even the decorations on your walls. China produces 70 to 90% of all these goods globally. But here's what makes this dominance different from anything you've heard before. It's not just about cheap labor anymore. China manufactures more textiles than the next 20 countries combined. 90% of the world's buttons come from one city, Qiaotou. Zippers, 80% from another single region. The thread holding your clothes together, the fabric itself, the dyes coloring it, all dominated by Chinese production capacity that no other nation can remotely approach. Furniture manufacturing tells the same story. 65% of global furniture exports. But the real shock is speed. A furniture manufacturer in Vietnam or Mexico might take 8 weeks from order to delivery. Chinese factories? 2 weeks, sometimes less. Not because of labor costs, because the entire supply chain exists within a 50-mile radius. Wood processing, hardware manufacturing, upholstery materials, packaging, logistics, everything in one industrial ecosystem. Toys, kitchenware, lighting fixtures, luggage, eyewear, the percentages run between 70 and 95% of global production, even Christmas decorations. Yiwu, one city, produces 60% of all Christmas ornaments sold worldwide. Every December, the world decorates with products from a single Chinese manufacturing hub. But here's the real foundation of all this consumer dominance, the materials making everything possible. The materials building everything. Before anything gets manufactured, before any product exists, you need raw materials. And this is where China's dominance becomes almost impossible to comprehend. Steel. 1 billion tons annually. That's more than the next 10 countries combined. The United States produces 80 million tons. Japan, 90 million. China, over 1 billion. To put that in perspective, China produced more steel in 3 years than the United States produced during the entire 20th century. Every bridge, every building, every car frame globally depends on this production capacity. But steel is just the beginning. Aluminum, 57% of global production. Cement, 55%. And here's the shocking part. Between 2010 and 2013, China used more cement than the United States used in the entire 1900s. Glass manufacturing, rebar, ceramic tiles, insulation materials all dominated at levels above 50% global market share. Then came the realization that shook global construction markets. The equipment building everything. Excavators, Chinese manufacturers now control 60% of global sales. Cranes, both tower cranes for construction and port cranes for shipping, 70%. Concrete pumps, the machines that make high-rise construction possible, dominated by Chinese manufacturers who've crushed companies like Caterpillar in market after market. The construction equipment advantage isn't just price, it's delivery time. A European crane manufacturer quotes 12 months for delivery. Chinese competitor? 4 months. Same specifications, half the weight, and increasingly comparable quality. But you can't build with steel and cement alone. You need the machinery that turns raw materials into finished products, the machines making everything else. Here's something most people never think about before factories can make products. They need machines to make those products. And China dominates the machines behind global manufacturing. CNC machine tools, the precision equipment cutting and shaping metal components for everything from engine parts to medical devices. China produces more than Germany, Japan, and the United States combined. Injection molding machines, the equipment forming every plastic product you've ever touched, 70% global production. Textile machinery that equips clothing factories worldwide, including factories competing against Chinese manufacturers, 85% market share. Industrial robots tell an even more dramatic story. China doesn't just make robots, it installs more industrial robots annually than the rest of the world combined. 290,000 robots installed in 2022 alone. Japan installed 50,000. The United States, 34,000. The gap isn't closing, it's widening every year. But here's where it gets truly shocking. Home appliances. Air conditioners, 80% of global production. Refrigerators, 70%. Washing machines, 65%. These aren't luxury goods. These are the appliances in hundreds of millions of homes worldwide. And one country controls the overwhelming majority of production. Forging equipment, mining machinery, packaging equipment, the industrial backbone running factories on every continent comes from Chinese manufacturing. Even Western companies trying to reshore production end up buying Chinese machinery because alternatives either don't exist or cost double with longer delivery times. Then came the industry nobody saw being dominated: chemistry itself. The molecules behind modern life. Chemistry runs everything. Medicine, materials, agriculture, manufacturing, it all starts with chemical production. And China's dominance here is almost total. Active pharmaceutical ingredients. The raw chemical compounds that become medications, 80% of global production. That antibiotic your doctor prescribed? The painkiller in your cabinet? The blood pressure medication keeping millions alive? The core ingredients come from Chinese chemical plants. During COVID, the world suddenly realized one terrifying fact. The entire global pharmaceutical industry depends on Chinese API production. Antibiotics over 80%. Vitamins 90% of certain types, including vitamin C at 95% global production. Ibuprofen, penicillin, aspirin, the chemical foundations of modern medicine flow through Chinese factories. But medicine is just one category. Fertilizers. China produces more nitrogen fertilizer than any nation on Earth. Without it, global food production collapses. Plastics, the raw polymers becoming everything from packaging to car parts, dominated at levels exceeding 60% in multiple categories. Then came advanced materials that barely existed a decade ago. Carbon fiber, the lightweight material in aircraft and high-performance vehicles, 60% global production. Graphene, the revolutionary material promising to transform electronics, 70% of global output. Advanced ceramics for electronics and industrial applications, similar dominance. The pattern repeats across industrial chemistry. Dyes, coatings, adhesives, specialty chemicals production capacity that competitors abandoned because they couldn't match Chinese scale and pricing. But chemicals need raw materials, and that's where the real chokehold begins. The elements controlling everything. You can't see them. Most people have never heard their names. But rare earth elements power every piece of modern technology, and China controls 90% of global processing capacity. Neodymium in electric motors. Dysprosium in wind turbines. Europium in every screen you've ever looked at. Terbium in solid-state drives. These aren't optional materials, they're absolutely essential for modern technology. And one country refined the processing so completely that building alternatives would take decades and cost hundreds of billions. But here's the thing that makes this dominance truly unstoppable. It's not just rare earths. Lithium processing for batteries, 70% global capacity. Cobalt refining, 68%. Graphite for battery anodes, 70%, with some types hitting 95%. Manganese, tungsten at 85%. Antimony at 80%, gallium at 95%, germanium at 70%. You can mine these minerals anywhere. Multiple countries have reserves. But refining them into usable materials for manufacturing, that's where China created an unbreakable advantage. The processing facilities, the technical expertise, the environmental costs, other countries won't accept all concentrated in Chinese industrial zones. Then, in 2023, came the export controls. gallium and germanium restrictions, and the global technology industry panicked. Semiconductor manufacturers, defense contractors, solar panel producers, all scrambling because one decision from one country could halt their entire production. Every electric vehicle battery depends on Chinese mineral processing. Every wind turbine, every smartphone, every laptop. The energy transition everyone talks about. Impossible without Chinese mineral refining capacity. But minerals alone don't move. You need the transportation revolution happening right now, moving people and goods. Transportation is being completely rebuilt. And China isn't just participating, it's rewriting what's possible. High-speed rail, 28,000 miles of track. The rest of the world combined? Less than 10,000 miles. Trains running at 217 miles per hour on regular routes, with test speeds hitting 380 miles per hour. China built more high-speed rail in the last decade than exists in all of Europe, Japan, and Korea combined. But the real shock is construction speed. Europe announces a high-speed rail line completion date 15 years away. China announces, breaks ground, and opens for passengers in 4 years. The engineering capabilities and construction pace make Western infrastructure projects look frozen in time. Then came shipbuilding dominance that controls global trade. 50% of world tonnage built in Chinese shipyards. The largest container ships ever constructed Chinese. The fastest delivery times Chinese. South Korea held shipbuilding dominance for decades. Now Chinese yards deliver the same vessels in 2/3 the time at lower cost. Port cranes loading and unloading those ships? 70% Chinese-made. Even American ports, despite security concerns, use Chinese cranes because alternatives either don't exist at scale or cost twice as much. Electric vehicles hit even harder. BYD outsold Tesla globally in 2023. 60% of the world's EVs roll off Chinese production lines. Not just cars, electric buses replacing diesel fleets in cities worldwide. E-bikes at 90% global production, electrifying transportation across developing nations. Subway cars for metro systems globally. Chinese manufacturers winning contracts in dozens of countries because they deliver faster and cheaper than established European competitors. But moving people means nothing without the energy to power it all. Powering the future. The energy transition. Every country talks about it. One country is actually doing it at a scale that defies belief. Solar panels, 85% of global production. But that number alone doesn't capture the dominance. Follow the entire supply chain. Polysilicon, the raw material for solar cells, 80% Chinese production. Solar wafers, 95%. Solar cells, 90%. The entire vertical chain from raw material to finished panel, locked down by one nation's manufacturing ecosystem. The result? Solar panel prices collapsed 90% in 15 years. Not through innovation alone, through manufacturing scale so massive it made competing economically impossible. European and American solar manufacturers went bankrupt not because Chinese panels were lower quality, but because they cost half as much and flooded global markets. Wind turbines tell the same story. 60% of global production. The world's largest offshore wind turbines. Chinese designed, Chinese built. Onshore turbine manufacturing capacity exceeding all Western competitors combined. Then came the battery empire. Lithium-ion battery cells, 76% of global production. CATL, one company, produces more batteries than all American manufacturers combined. BYD's blade batteries achieving ranges Western automakers can't match. Battery production capacity growing faster than electric vehicle demand can absorb it. Energy storage systems for grid-scale renewable integration dominated. Hydroelectric turbines controlled. The equipment making renewable energy possible at utility scale comes overwhelmingly from Chinese manufacturers. But here's the most shocking part. China installs more solar capacity in 1 year than the United States has installed in total throughout its entire history. More wind capacity annually than Europe combined. The energy transition isn't theory there, it's industrial reality happening at speeds that make Western targets look laughable. And none of this renewable equipment works without infrastructure being built at impossible scale. Building the impossible. Infrastructure used to be something countries built over generations. China builds it in years. The Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, 34 miles long, the longest sea-crossing bridge ever constructed, includes a 4-mile underwater tunnel. Completion time? 9 years for a project engineering experts said was impossible. 16 of the world's highest bridges, Chinese. The world's longest tunnel networks, Chinese. But the numbers don't capture the speed. A train station in Longyan rebuilt in 9 hours, completely demolished and reconstructed while passengers slept. Time-lapse footage went viral because engineers worldwide couldn't believe it was real. Three Gorges Dam, the largest power station ever built, generates 98.8 terawatt-hours annually. That's more than the entire electricity consumption of countries like Argentina or Norway. The dam alone required 28 million cubic yards of concrete and 463,000 tons of steel. Subway construction moved from impossible to routine. Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, metro systems that took London and New York a century to build, constructed in 15 years. Not just in major cities. Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, building metro systems faster than Western megacities can expand existing lines. The construction methodology is what changed everything. 24/7 work schedules, massive labor forces, prefabricated components, and zero permitting delays. A highway overpass project that would take an American city 2 years of environmental reviews and permitting, completed in 3 months, start to finish. Chinese construction firms now export this capability globally, building ports in Pakistan, railways in Africa, bridges in South America, mega projects on every continent using Chinese engineering, Chinese equipment, and increasingly Chinese financing. But physical infrastructure is only half the story. Digital infrastructure is being dominated even harder, connecting everything. 5G, the network infrastructure defining the next decade of technology. And despite Western bans, security concerns, and political pressure, Chinese companies still dominate. Huawei and ZTE control the patents. Over 15,000 5G patents between them. More than Qualcomm, Samsung, and Nokia combined. You can ban Huawei equipment from networks, but you can't ban the fundamental technology they developed and patented. Every 5G network globally pays licensing fees to Chinese companies, whether they use Chinese equipment or not. Network equipment deployment tells an even starker story. In countries that didn't ban Chinese manufacturers, Huawei and ZTE captured 60 to 70% market share. Not through subsidies alone, through equipment that costs half what European competitors charge and ships in half the time. Then came surveillance technology that redefined what's possible. 700 million cameras deployed domestically. Facial recognition systems that can identify individuals in crowds of thousands within seconds. AI-powered monitoring across entire cities, integrating traffic cameras, subway stations, public spaces into unified surveillance networks. Hikvision and Dahua, 60% of global security camera production. They don't just sell cameras, they sell integrated systems with AI analytics, facial recognition, behavior prediction algorithms. Technology that's years ahead in deployment and capability because of domestic testing at massive scale. Smart city systems being exported to over 100 countries. Not just cameras, integrated city management platforms controlling traffic lights, monitoring air quality, managing emergency response, tracking population movement. Complete digital infrastructure packages that cities buy because building equivalent systems independently would cost 5 times more. Mobile payments reach scales that make Western digital payment systems look primitive. WeChat Pay and Alipay processing trillions in transactions. QR code payments so universal that street vendors and luxury stores use identical systems. E-commerce infrastructure handling package volumes that dwarf Western logistics. Alibaba's Singles Day, moving $540 billion in merchandise. JD.com, delivering packages to rural villages faster than Amazon delivers in American suburbs. But all of this, every industry mentioned so far, exists because of one thing: the ecosystem making everything possible. This is why everything else on this list exists. This is the foundation nobody talks about, but everyone depends on. Shenzhen. One city produces more electronics than most countries' entire industrial output. But it's not just production, it's the ecosystem. You need a circuit board? 50 factories within 10 miles. Custom plastic housing? 20 manufacturers within 5 miles. Screws, adhesives, packaging, testing equipment, shipping, logistics, everything within a 50-mile radius. Speed is the weapon nobody can counter. A hardware startup in Silicon Valley takes 6 months from prototype to production. Same company moves to Shenzhen? 6 weeks. Because the factory making their product sits next to the factory making their components, next to the testing facility, next to the packaging manufacturer, next to the shipping terminal. Dongguan specializes in manufacturing components. Yiwu handles small commodities, 90% of global production of items, like buttons, zippers, threads, basic hardware. You want 1 million zippers in 12 different colors delivered in 3 weeks? One city can do it. Try that anywhere else. Impossible. The cluster effect created industrial cities specialized for specific sectors. Datang for socks, 8 billion pairs annually, 1/3 of global production from one town. Chaotou for buttons. Shangzhou for ties and scarves. Complete industrial ecosystems for individual product categories. 200 million manufacturing workers. That's more than the entire workforce of the United States. You can't replicate that. You can't just move it to Vietnam, or Mexico, or India. Those countries don't have the component manufacturers, the machinery suppliers, the logistics networks, the technical expertise built over 40 years. Then came automation, without losing flexibility. Installing more industrial robots than the rest of the world combined, while maintaining the ability to switch production lines in days instead of months. The iPhone assembly line can pivot to making different models faster than Western factories can retool for minor changes. Companies talk about reshoring production. Then they realize the components still come from China. The machinery comes from China. The testing equipment comes from China. You can assemble somewhere else, but the supply chain still runs through Chinese manufacturing ecosystems. Buttons, zippers, threads, cardboard boxes, plastic packaging, metal fasteners, 90% global production of manufacturing fundamentals. You can't make finished products without these basics, and one country controls the supply. This is the industrial base that makes every other category possible. The electronics, the machinery, the consumer goods, the construction materials, all built on manufacturing clusters that took 4 decades to develop and would take 4 decades to replicate. Over 100 industries, production capacity exceeding the rest of the world, combined in dozens of categories. Vertical integration from raw materials to finished products across entire sectors. This isn't cheap labor. This is industrial architecture, built at a scale and speed never before achieved in human history. And it's not slowing down, it's accelerating into semiconductors, aviation, advanced materials, technologies that don't exist yet. This is what complete industrial dominance looks like. But even that's not the end of the story. Because while dominating current industries, China is already capturing the future. The Australian Strategic Policy Institute tracks 44 critical and emerging technologies: artificial intelligence, quantum computing, advanced robotics, hypersonics, synthetic biology. China leads in 37 of them, not competing, leading. In high-risk, high-reward fields like quantum communication, they're not just ahead, they've deployed satellites and networks that won't exist in the West for years. Hypersonic weapons, advanced battery chemistry, autonomous systems, biotechnology, dominant research output, dominant patent filings, dominant real-world deployment. The industrial dominance happening now? That's just the foundation for technological dominance in every sector that matters for the next 50 years.